With the full release of Tarkov on the horizon, we've been doing quite a lot of reflection on the game and its history as of late, going over all the different, essentially, versions of the game as the years went on, all the ups and downs, and the current state of affairs right before release. The one thing we have not mentioned much is what happens after 1.0 goes out. We can see the goalpost, it's literally right there, but what happens after we cross it? Does the game just cease development and BSG moves on to their next project? Do they keep a smaller crew on in case there are any huge game-breaking bugs or glitches? Or do they keep supporting the game with additional content, DLCs, and expansions? At this point, as much as I am curious about what the game looks like come November, I'm arguably more curious what the game looks like 3, 6, 12 months after launch. So let's have a conversation about the hypothetical plans for Tarkov post-launch, where it can go, what might realistically happen, and what's next for Battlestate Games when they decide it's finally time to cease production on this game. There are a few ways, at least from my perspective, Tarkov can be handled after launch. The first and most obvious one is that the game is just basically done after that 1.0 patch. Maybe a couple of hotfixes here and there if any major problems that mess with the game creep up, but it's very much hands-off after that release date passes and BSG begins focused on their next project, which doesn't feel like it's going to be the case. Another option is a little more hands-on, where they keep us in the loop for some adjustments across the game should EFT need it. More focused balance patches that tackle any issues, big or small, at least for the immediate future. And this goes on for a little while. What those changes or additions are, it doesn't really matter. In this circumstance, we at least know they're continuing support for the game for a little while after launch, which is generally better than BSG just abandoning the game as soon as it hits 1.0. And the other option is that they continue heavy support for Tarkov way beyond the launch. Tons of bug and balance fixes, additional content like weapons and gears and the like we're so used to, and even major expansions that would be considered DLC for this game, such as the Scav Life expansion that has been hinted at for many years now. And this support goes on for, I would say, at least almost an additional year, if not longer, so long as the game is pulling decent numbers and people are generally interested in more content, which is up in the air whether or not that happens. Other than those hypotheticals, I don't really see any other alternative outcomes for post-launch Tarkov. Out of all the possible outcomes that Tarkov can have post 1.0, the most reasonable and realistic expectation would be that once the patch is live and we're all playing it, BSG does keep tabs on what is happening and makes adjustments should anything be too egregious. They have said multiple times that they do have plans for some expansions and DLCs, one of which, if I recall correctly, was a winter-themed expansion focusing on snow terrain, snow gear, and maybe things related to our PMC's temperature. Kind of like Sakal and DayZ, but since we got snow last winter, that's most likely maybe on the back burner until they can come up with something entirely new to add. We might see the return of some of those maps that had been on the world selection screen for years but never amounted to anything, like Suburb and Town and potentially other maps that we've just never seen before. The other idea that was floated around for years was a massive overhaul and expansion to long-range weapons like bolt actions. Something about making that playstyle more interesting, engaging, and rewarding, while also adding some highly requested bolt action rifles. Not entirely sure how they would accomplish expanding sniper gameplay, but since that's my personal favorite way to play Tarkov, anything that could make it better is totally fine by me. Again, all of this information is very old, and there is a good chance that plans have changed drastically behind the curtain, so who knows if we're even going to see a single expansion to the game post-launch. But my hopes, and what is realistically possible, is that we see at least one DLC, otherwise the promise of all future expansions for Edge of Darkness and Unheard owners kind of goes to waste now, doesn't it? Other than the game potentially receiving support after it officially launches, the other major question we have for BSG is, what are their plans? What game do they want to make after Tarkov, if they even want to at this point? The answer to that, for years, was the true single-player version of Tarkov, Russia 2028. It would take place inside the universe of EFT, and we would most likely follow either a solo survivor or a small team trying to get answers as to what happened and then figuring out their escape post-EMP launch. Other than that, we have very little details, so this is mostly speculation on my part, but for some reason, I have reservations about them going right into making that game if it is still their next project. I'm not gonna speak for Nikita, but I would imagine he might be a little tired of this setting and maybe he wants to do something vastly different. Which, to be fair, I wouldn't blame him. Working on this game for as long as he and BSG have must have taken a couple years off of his life expectancy. If he wanted to tackle a different setting or premise entirely, I would still be interested in paying attention to his work. For all the crap the community has given him, Nikita is truly a visionary when it comes to modern military combat, and I'd be interested to see something in a sci-fi setting or more historical war setting. Just because they finished EFT doesn't mean I at least won't be looking out for their next game. It'll most likely take a long time before we see teasers of any kind, but I'm willing to wait, especially if it's another single-player game. That will make it so much easier and so much less stress for them with how they develop the game, meaning they'll be able to potentially focus on the core loop and other aspects much more, meaning a better, more polished product in the end. Well, at least that would be the hope. Either way, regardless of how you feel about him and his game, I'd like to hope that they have at least one more game in them so that we can see something brand new from BSG in 2025, and that hopefully won't take over a decade to release into a full product. Tarkov is nearing its technical development end very soon. Once 1.0 happens, we are very uncertain as to how much more BSG is going to support and inject into this game. As someone who still enjoys it, I'd like to see continued support for a little while, as long as the numbers are strong and they still have the drive and motivation to continue with EFT. Otherwise, it'll be off to something new, and that kind of gets my brain going with all sorts of what-ifs with where they could go next. Again, we give this game in BSG a lot of shit, and most of the time it's rightfully deserved. But thinking about something new from these guys, something else that could be adapted into a series like the Raid series was, I don't know, man, it gets my imagination kind of going. And I think that's a good thing, especially after all these years. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Let me know down in the comment section below your thoughts on what happens after Tarkov hits 1.0, how much support you think it might receive, whether or not you want another game from BSG, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about thinking way too far ahead into the future for things that might not even happen. I hope to see you in future ones.